Le cheval plaît beaucoup, hein. C'est un vecteur de communication extraordinaire.
Avant d'être un cavalier, c'était important d'être un horseman.
Always put the horse before the personal ambitions.
Vraiment un cheval incroyable.
Voilà quelqu'un qui est champion olympique et qui n'est pas ordinaire.
Se remettre en question et peut se servir des défaites pour être meilleur après.
Ce feeling, je l'ai eu directement avec Caleb.
On fait du haut niveau, il y a le côté financier, c'est comme ça.
Aller en compétition parce qu'il est bon, pas parce qu'il paye une table.
Moi, je veux pas courir mes chevaux pour l'argent.
If you can do it in a way that doesn't take too much out of your horses.
Quand on voit l'évolution en 10 ans de temps, qu'est-ce que ça va être dans 10 ans?
Pouvoir motiver les jeunes à aller au bout de leurs rêves.
Forme de très très bons compétiteurs. Je ne vais pas dire que ça forme des hommes de chevaux.
Pour moi, les bons moments, ils sont à venir.
Aujourd'hui, réussir sa vie, c'est avoir la vie que l'on souhaite.
What if I told you that in Europe there is a country, a culture, in which the horse is a common root? A country where, in the words of Enda Caroll, and I quote, "It's perfectly normal to grow up around horses because in one way or another, there are horses in every family, in their culture in general." Ireland. Enda went on to point out that there were 12 Irish riders in the top 100 at the time we recorded our episode with him. If we had to prove once again the common equestrian roots of Irish riders, then we could use the story that follows. Michael Duffy is definitely one of them. A child of the country, a pure product of this equestrian culture, of this nation that grows up and lives with horses, never far away, never too far. Michael Duffy carries these roots with him just as he carries the green jackets of the Irish team. At the age of 31, he has already recorded more than 2,500 starts in international classes with no fewer than 160 different horses. And I'm only talking about FEI competitions. 26% of first quarters in all the Grand Prix in which he has taken part, 10% of podiums, 3% of victories. It's enough to make you dream, and that's just for starters. Because Michael Duffy pursues great ambitions. He's a hard worker, a relentless worker. He's always been a horseman, and he is still a real horse enthusiast. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you do, as always, remember to drop us a DM on Instagram, share the link of the episode in your stories to recommend it to your friends and family. Happy listening to you all. So good afternoon, Michael Duffy. I'm going to introduce this episode. We are here at Ocala World Equestrian Center, where you show you're staying for the season, I guess. We're going to talk about that. So you were born in a pure breed Irish family. Your grandfather was a course designer, built courses in Spruce Meadow or London Olympia, as I read. And your dad was a show jumper, a horseman, as you mentioned in various articles, interviews. He participated in several Nations Cup. And you, Michael Paul Duffy, not to be confounded with Michael G. Duffy, you are the youngest Irish senior national show jumping champion. Over your career, you worked alongside with Shane Breen, Keane O'Connor, so we're meeting today in Florida, where you're showing for the season. Before we talk about today, about your system, about your horses, about the challenges you will be facing, and about your ambitions, we would like to know a little bit better your story. Can you tell us the story of yours through every main chapter that has been important to build the career that you have today?
Yeah, look, it's quite a long story, I suppose, but yeah, I was very, very lucky. My parents, my family was all very, very horsey. You know, my grandparents had a riding school in Claregalway, so there was always, you know, a lot of horses and ponies, and as you said, my dad rode. He rode at a good level when he was younger, and then he was, you know, very big on the national circuit then for years to come, and so yeah, like it was always horses and ponies, and you know, it was never really much thought going into it, for my career, or it was never. I was good at school, but I had no real interest in being there, and it was always going to be horses.
When did you really know that you would be a show jumper as a professional, like at your earliest age?
Yeah, as I said, like I don't know what age I started riding at. I think I went to the RDS Dublin Horse Show for the first time when I was 10 years old on my 12-2 pony. So it's always been horses. We love my father as well. We both love national hunt racing and flat racing as well. So there was a time when I flirted with the idea of being a jockey instead of a show jumper, but I was already too far gone with the jumping. I was going to be tall enough for a jockey, and I probably mightn't have been any good, So, but I did. I rode out for a couple of months, and it was in the winter, and it was, do I go? Will I stay? And eventually, I think I stuck to. I think I made the right choice anyway. But I stuck to what I knew, which was the jumping, and we still have a good few thoroughbreds as well. And my father, I think he was 40 or 42, and within 1 year, the yard went from 25 horses for him to 25 ponies for me. He basically stopped and then went put everything into me. So from then on we were just jumping really.
But still, you left home at some point. When was that, and why did you decide to leave the venues that you have and the structure that you have there to follow your own path?
Ireland back then. Okay, so I was 17 or 18 when I left. I think it was just about to turn 18, or I had maybe anyway. I had already done 3 or 4 months working for Cian O'Connor, and then I went back to finish my school to do my leaving cert. Ireland back then was, well, it's still, it hasn't moved, it's still very, very far away, but there was not the same access to horses or shows, as there is in mainland Europe or further afield. So it was always, to be honest, it was difficult. Like my father was also a bit not upset, but he knew I had to do it, but also wanted me to stay at home. We still have the yard at home, and it's full of horses. We still have a rider there now, and all the young ones are still there. But it was difficult for him as well. But I always wanted to, kick on and to, it's very difficult to make it to the top from there. Definitely back then. Now you see a lot more. Keane is based at home and more, and Greg Broderick is based at home, and Clem McMahon had a very good horse a couple of years ago, all based from Ireland, So it's not impossible, but it is probably just a touch more difficult. And then the opportunity came up to go to Shane Breen in Hickstead, and it was a great opportunity. And I remember the first week I came home from Dublin Horse Show with Shane in the truck, and I went to a show on Tuesday. Got home Monday morning and straight to the show with 8 horses on Tuesday. So there was no hanging around there.
So you trained with Cian O'Connor and Shane Breen. What did you learn alongside those two people?
Yeah, okay, Cian, I wasn't there so long, and I was young as well. When I look back, maybe I was probably a bit too young when I went to him. Didn't really. I didn't ride as good as I can or am or whatever. But then when I went to Shane's, listen, it was great for experience and for shows, and I'm very lucky. I've worked with a lot of good people. So I suppose with Shane, he's one of my best friends now as well. So, but he's big horseman, with the young horses, and he goes hunting in the winters, and he'll get home from a big fancy show on Sunday night, and he'll be out jumping 3-year-olds on Monday morning in the wind and the rain. He's a real horseman. And then I left Shane I was with him for a year, and then I left and I went on my own. I had a few good offers of jobs. When I look back, should I have taken them? I don't know. I remember I had a meeting with Stefan Conter in Stefex, and he wanted Lorenzo, but Lorenzo wasn't going at the time or whatever, and I agreed to go. And then a week later I saw Lorenzo was there, and I said to him, how can you have horses for everyone? And then that next year he had 5 riders in the top 30 in the world or whatever. It was crazy. So maybe I jumped the gun there a bit too soon, but at least I got to ride for him in the end. So I got a couple of horses from him now, and I train the girls a bit as well with Elena. And then I went off with. I did a good few months with Henk Noren when I was a kid as well in Holland. He was very, very good. I remember I had a very good horse called Belcanto, and I'd done the 5-star Cup in Alain, it was called, in Abu Dhabi, out that side. And I just got back from there. I went straight to Henk's, and he, first day riding, he said, do a shoulder in. I said, what the hell is that? You know what I mean? I had no clue about dressage. I was, just he really put a bit of polish on my riding and a bit of style into the west of Ireland side of me. And then now lately, the last 5-6 years, I've been with Elena Stormans, and she's brilliant. Yeah, she's probably been the biggest, I would say, influence on my career. Definitely.
So you trained with Keane O'Connor and Shane Breen. Have there been people along the way who have marked your career, from whom you have drawn particular inspiration, and to whom you undoubtedly owe a large part of your career?
Yeah, listen, I think you learn from everyone, and watching and doing. It's, if you're smart enough, you'll pick it up. But definitely, Helena, I've based there now for the last 3 years, but I've worked with her for 6 or 8. I'd say she's probably been the biggest, with horses, and she put me on a global team. I remember she rang up in, I think it was 2018, and she said, will you go on a global team? She didn't even ask me what horses I had, or, she was just so confident and she was, a big believer in me, so that was a good confidence.
Elena is a very popular trainer here in the US. She has trained people like Jessica Springsteen or William Whittaker, and we can see and we can say that it's completely different. The way you have a trainer here in the US or the way you are trained in Europe, the system is different. What's your opinion on that? Because it looks like having a trainer here in the US, it's different, it's important. In Europe, for example, the riders would be having clients, but sports would be a priority. Whereas here in the US, the trainer are trainers, first and foremost. Is that right?
Yes and no, I would say. They are quite... there's quite a lot more, I would say, training goes on in the States, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, I think the more help you have and eyes on the ground, the better. Like if you look at any other sport and you look at, swimmers or footballers, they've got a, defence coach, an attacking coach, a fitness coach. They've all got bloody, people who expertise in their own fields, So, I think, like I do a lot of training as well. I've had a lot of clients down through the years, and even here I'm helping Zoe Conter, but we're still riding myself. So you have to balance it up. But I suppose like on the flip side, then when you get someone like Elena, she had an amazing career, and then it was over. Now you see a lot. Francis Lutak gives a lot of help. He was one of the, probably not the best rider in the world. And I suppose when that stage of their career was over, they can give back to other people by through the training.
Would you say that you're having now much more of an American style, because the American riding, the American show jumpers have such a strong accent in their riding, the way they are always forward, the balance they have on the horse. It's like when we see McLean or Beatsy, they are very American, or Kent. Are you influenced in that way by Elena and by the training you have with her?
Yeah, well, okay, we're German based, so we're definitely we're here in the States a lot. Like I probably do, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 months of the year jump in over here, but I would definitely say we're European based, and ultimately, like you see, because of location and styles, how they're different, but you have to take from everyone, I would say that's actually where the Irish are quite unique, in the fact that they're chameleons, I suppose. You know what I mean? But like I know I would sit maybe a lot more into the horse than I used to, but I think ultimately you have to pick and choose parts of each, and not base yourself on one particular rider or that, but also you have to I ride all my horses different. Like Skyhawk I jumped today, he has no spurs, he's so sensitive and he has so much blood. You're always just sitting like a mouse and keeping him quiet. And then there's other horses that are a bit colder or a bit slower. You have to get a bit more into them, so ultimately I think you have to change to you have to ride the horse, if that makes sense.
So to talk about you, Michael, and I want to talk about your system. You set up your own business and stables at a very young age, at 20. Can you tell us about your team, about your owners, and what balance do you strike between Europe and the United States, and almost between sport and business?
Yeah, we have a big setup now. Yeah, you could say in 10 or 12 years of business now. There's a lot of horses. I'm very, very lucky. I've got some good owners, people who support me, like Genevieve Meyer and Gwendolyn Sondheim, and Monica McCourt, Rushy Marsh, Stéphane Conter, he owns Clapton Mouche. My mum, she owns Quirex. We can't leave her out either. And yeah, it's difficult, but you have to, first and foremost, you have to pay the bills. Something doesn't grow on trees, so you gotta pay the bills at the end of every month. So, but I have a lot of horses. We do everything. We breed, I don't know, maybe 5-6 mares ourselves every year, and I buy another 5-10 foals every year. I think we've well north of 100 horses now.
So you do have your own horses? I
have loads of them. Yeah,
at home.
Yeah, they're all. Well, most of them are in Ireland. We'd have other bits and bobs in Germany, and a lot of shares and things. So, but yeah, I'd have. Yeah, probably I think there's 10 yearlings, mares, foals, 3-year-olds, stallions. I've also got a big breeding. I've owned a good few stallions breeding. I own a very good horse called Dursanat with Owen McMahon. He stands in Ireland. He's the father of Tim Gredley's horse Medoc and Ellen Bayard's horse De Fleur. So we've got a good few stallions. I've got a good 3-year-old, that's 4-year-old now, I should say, that's going to cover probably, we hope, north of 100 mares this year in Ireland. Yeah, and we sell a few. We have to, unfortunately, we'd love to keep them all, but we sell a few. Yeah, and then I do a bit of training, bit of riding, bit of jumping, bit of everything.
That's a lot of young horses. How do you manage to develop them? I'm assuming that you have riders, but how does it work? At what age do you start riding yourself the horses? When do you decide that this horse will be for sale, this horse will be for you, this horse would be to keep developing for the highest level?
Yeah, it all, again, it changes from horse to horse. We break them all ourselves, and I would do a lot of that myself. I don't break them all, but like I had a few this winter in Germany. There was a very nice 4-year-old stallion that I sold in an auction of Greg Broderick's. I broke him myself in the winter. As I said, yeah, we've got a few riders. You just, we'll assess them. We'll jump them as 3-year-olds, and when they look good, we'll, try and hold out as long as we can. Every horse, you have to have patience with the young horses, really, because horses are so well bred now. Some can be just a bit later or a bit this or a bit that, but ultimately you have to give them as much time as you can. And yeah, like the horse I jump here, B Skyhawk, I bought him as a 3-year-old. He was actually just broken when I bought him. But he was always extremely talented. Like his first show, I didn't do anything with him as a 4-year-old. I rode him, but he didn't need to show. He was so brave. His first show was the main ring in Hickstead, National 5-year-old Championships, and he skipped around, So then I just did a little bit. He never did more than 6-7 shows a year. Just kept him under the radar. And then last year he jumped clear in the team class in Monaco and the Masters in Stuttgart. He'd won down as an 8-year-old. And he's the kind of early. I had another one called Pablo Van Het Geinstein, which jumped, was sold to Daniel Laman as an 8-year-old, and he jumped the global tour as an 8-year-old in Madrid. So they're the first they're 8 and 9 and 10 years old now, and they're the first crop of the young ones that we've had. So, yeah, you just got to give them time, and hope they're good enough.
Last year, you won your first 5-star Grand Prix at the Miami Global with a French horse, Clapton Mouche, who is owned by Stéphane Conteur, if I understand. Despite extensive breeding in Ireland, you've made a name for yourself with this very French horse. Cian O'Connor said in our podcast that you have to be a French rider to ride a French horse. What do you think of that?
Look, I don't think, there's so many good riders now. And the horses, I actually think France is one of the best producers of horses because, again, France, they're not as early commercially minded, I find. They'll wait and and all the horses, they jump the open water at 4, 5, 6. And the horses get, I would say, a bit more time there to come into themselves. And you see it a lot. Like we all see the videos of, some of these famous horses when they were 4, 5, 6, and you go, well, what was that?
I think Cian was saying that the French rider do not flat work enough, and the horses are a bit wild to ride.
Well, it's all relative. Like at the end of the day, we don't. It's it's about leaving the jumps up, and that's the beauty of our sport. You knock one down, you're out. There's men against women on equal level playing fields. You've got French, you've got Simon Deleste, who's, he's not that tall and he's very light, very fit, and then you've got, someone like Frank Schuttert, who's, I don't know, bloody 6'5" or whatever, So it's all relative, and yeah. So some of them maybe don't have a beautiful mouth, or their dressage isn't as good, but that's our job, is to ride them and work around them.
You said earlier that maybe the Irish riders are a bit unique in their style and riding, and we had a conversation, not in the podcast, but when talking with Shane Breen in Lyon, and he was saying that the first memory he has about Bertram Allen was Bertram being a kid on the very small pony and riding very fast toward a fence in the field, hunting, and Shane was saying that every time he has a horse a little bit complicated, and that to watch a bit is a bit careful about the environment, he would just take him hunting with the rest of the horses. Do you think that's where do you think this uniqueness of Irish style comes from? Is this from hunting? Is this from the racing that is very important as an industry in Ireland, much more than in France, for example, or here in the US? Or what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's just, it really is, it's a nation of horse people, like it's very accessible in Ireland, obviously because everything is so expensive here in the States, for example. It's not that easy to go and get a horse to ride, whereas in Ireland there's a pony in every field, or, you know what I mean? It is very, very accessible. And like I remember I jumped 18 different ponies at a show one day when I was a kid, and most of them jumped twice. I don't know how many fences that is, and that you can't put a price on, that's that experience. I had jumped, I don't know how many thousands of fences by the time I was 16, and just the sheer, accessibility of it. It's actually funny you mentioned Bertram. He beat me in the 12-2s in Dublin that year. Yeah. I was second and he won. Yeah, so, but like when if you go to Dublin Horse Show and you see the 12-2 class, which is just after the Nations Cup, see how fast they go. And those little ponies. It's so competitive like that. That from an early age, I don't know another country, like it. Ireland, England would be similar. That are.
Years ago, there was such a viral video of Harry Allen in Dublin, riding a class with a pace that was completely insane, and it got viral on the net because it's not something that we can see. Well, obviously not here in the US, but in France, in Europe, neither.
Yeah, and I think for me, like, would I swap my upbringing for no chance? I think ultimately you have to be, learn to be competitive, and learn to get on and go and ride every type of horse or pony, and do all that first, and you can always put a bit of polish on it later. I think if you get too rigid into stuck in how you have to, for sure we need to, our position is crucial, but if you're too at an early age, if you're too stuck on the the rigid things. You know, you forget to feel and also make a plan B in a course. You know, sometimes a horse will spook and you'll have to fit 6 in a 5 or, you know, or whatever, you know. Ultimately, we have to do the basics better than, you know, every day it has to be better. But, you know, not to be too stuck in one way, you know. You have to figure each horse out and each round out, each fence out individually, I find.
Which is the exact opposite of equitation and hunter.
Yeah, but I do I remember seeing a video of Dara Kenny riding, winning a hunt. I don't know anything about the hunters now, but he won some hunter derby, big thing, and he, you know, like we can. I think that is important. You know, the discipline that they get from that as well. Like that, it has to be 7 and it has to be, you know, this correct way is very, very good. But I would find, you know, that should come a little later in the career than maybe than you know, at the start. I think a lot of people come off the hunters and equitation and then go jumping. You know, I think it's good to you know, be competitive first and then you know, and then put a bit of polish on it.
So there are a number of excellent riders in Ireland. Ireland is an extremely strong nation in equestrian sport. We can talk about Cian O'Connor, Greg Broderick, Bertram Allen, Shane Breen and others. You are 31 years old. Is it difficult to stand out in such strong nation, to take your place among the best?
I wouldn't say it's difficult because ultimately, you know, you're only as good as you are, and your horses. You know, if you have a horse good enough and you are good enough, you'll make it. It's kind of as simple as that, really. And we're always having to look for the next horse, and you know, like. Ultimately, at the start of my career, again, I set up on my own, which was, you know, I had no backers, no nothing, so I had to I got a couple of good horses, and then they were all sold. You know, I had some very good horses. Major Tom is here with Rodrigo, Miss Untouchable with Leopold Van Asten. I had a very good horse, Belcanto, at the start, and they were all sold because we had to have, you know, had to feed ourselves too. So, but ultimately, if you can, you know, the stage I'm in my career now, I can start to keep a few more horses, and you know, I'm starting to get a few, you know, you get horses for a longer period that you can actually build a career with, you know, and then, long story short, if they're good enough, you know, you will if your horse is good enough and you're good enough, there's more shows now than ever before, so you will get the opportunities. Yeah.
Do you think that show jumping is still a meritocratic sport, that you can start from nowhere and being no one and still like climb up the ladder and manage to integrate a Nations Cup or a selection for championships?
I think so. Actually, recently there was a young Irish rider, Francis Fran O'Derwin. He got a good bit of stick online for you know, I think he was taken up wrongly. Actually, you know, he wasn't saying it in a bad way, but his argument was, if you are good enough, you'll make it. Now, money is obviously not irrelevant. You know, you need, you know, these horses. Everything is so expensive now. But his argument was, if you're a good enough rider and you work hard, you know, you can still do it. Like, you know, there's a lot of examples. You know, there's no crystal ball, or there's no clear path that says if you do X, Y, and Z, you're going to win a 5-star Grand Prix, you know. So you have to be resilient, you know. You have to be mentally very, very tough to keep going. You'll get more knockbacks than leg ups. So, but yeah, I think ultimately, if you're you know, a good worker and you're talented enough, I think you can make it. Yeah, you might not have to, you might not love every part of it, but it is possible. Yeah.
You said in a Grand Prix article back in 2020, Eventos, it was only the beginning of these questions. What I would hate to see will be the disappearance of the Nations Cup and the championships, because they represent sport in the purest form. They are historic and have been around for years. The global concept has also helped our sport evolve in recent years, taking it to a new place, visible to a new audience, which is also a good thing. A few years later, after winning your first 5-star in a global, do you confirm or not these comments? Very often we consider those two secrets opposing each other. What is your insight about that?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I still stand by. I think they're both essential parts of the sport now. the Nations Cups are still, it's still the trump card of it all. It was coming and going. There was, there was not. What am I trying to say here? Like for example, Hickstead, St. Gallen now have been dropped as well. Falsterbo is one I was trying to think of.
Aachen, La Baule.
Yeah, but okay, Aachen, they're still they've had to break away. What am I trying to say? There's nearly 3 sets of Nations Cups now, which is not ideal. So Hickstead, Falsterbo, those ones, they were kind of cast off and they have to fend for themselves, which they did last year, and fair play to them. The Rolex have picked up the best shows, which is incredible, and they're so tough, but they're it's the sport at the highest form. Thankfully Dublin has gone in there with them as well, and it's going to elevate it even further. And then ultimately at the end of the day, your championships are, that's what you'll remember in 20 years, And we were very lucky 2 years ago now, the Europeans, we had a silver medal. There's so many good riders go their whole career without ever having championship medals. So the sport is great. It's very, very healthy at the minute. Global tours are very, very tough. There's some people that think they're like this, or maybe not as hard as the other ones, which is rubbish. They're extremely difficult. They're as big as you can get, and fast. And you've got 20 of the top 30 riders at every one, and relentless schedule. There's I don't know how many, 15, 16 shows, but you're earning, like we jump for over $1 million. I think Monaco was $1.5 million, and the Super Grand Prix was 1.125 or something. So that's obviously the more money and the bigger the event, the harder it's going to be. They just need to be. The Nations Cups need looking after, because that's where the sport came from, and that's the historical side of it. And I love Nations Cups. As I said, the Irish team is very, very strong, so we'd like to do as many as we can. But it's also a healthy sign from them how many good riders there are. But yeah, still they're all brilliant, but your championships are still the pinnacle.
Talking about Milan and the European Championships, so you took the silver medal with the team, and that was an incredible performance. And then you qualified for the individual final, and decided not to ride the second round because of the fences you had and no chance to take another medal. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you said in an article that so you were taken the money prize off because of this withdrawal.
Yeah.
You said in an article, to be financially punished for putting my horse first seems contradictory to the FEI's message of horse welfare being paramount. What can we do? What should we do? And what should the FEI do about that? How can we put the horse well-being first and foremost every time and in all situations, even in championships and even at the Olympics?
That's a very, very good question. And as I said, I do, sometimes I'm a bit maybe vocal about certain topics, but I think if you say something, you should, or if you believe in something, you should stand behind it. And I do, at that day at the Europeans, she jumped 3 clear rounds already, Cinque. I had 2 down in the first round of the individual final, which was, a monstrosity of a course, which was, unbelievable, standard. She had given her all. If I had jumped clear in this last round, I would have been at best 4th or 5th. Nobody remembers who was 4th or 5th. She was an older mare, so I said I was gonna save her. The ground was not really up to standard, and the whole showground was not up to standard. So listen, that's water under the bridge. I think now the we're supposed to be seen. We're nearly making these rules now to be seen to be having the horse welfare at heart, rather than actually having the horse welfare at heart. I think educating people, why, correct use of spurs and bridles and tack is ultimately if you have a very, very, a horse with a difficult mouth that needs a pelham, for example, by putting his pelham on, he becomes more rideable. It makes it easier for the horse, that we don't get, down a rabbit hole of, all of a sudden we won't be allowed to, if we keep going down this road, in 20, 30 years, we might not be allowed to ride a horse again. So I think, and horse welfare, so for sure, all these issues with spurs and bits and, this new noseband rule, there's going to be people who take everything to the extreme, and those people need to be, an eye kept on them, but you can't penalise ultimately everyone, for the same reason.
Isn't it what happened to Pedro Venice at the Olympics?
Absolutely, okay, listen, it's very easy to sit here and point the finger at the FAI all the time, which we're all guilty of, but like this year with the boot check, right? So obviously we all need a boot check. They've changed it this year that you do a pre-boot check on all four legs and then nothing when you come out of the ring. That's a brilliant idea. That's whoever thought of that was, using their head, because that's you try and get a highly strung, fit, competitive athlete to stand still in here on Saturday night with crowd and lights and atmosphere. It's nearly impossible, and that's difficult for the horse. So it's not all bad. There are certain parts of it too that are coming better. Yeah.
I also read some words of yours in a magazine. As Elena says, if you rest, you rust. You cannot stop.
Yeah.
It makes me think of Laurent Guillet's word in our podcast. Laurent told us stopping is already moving backward. Can you comment this thoughts?
Yeah, look, I suppose, going back to from my youth, from my father, I've never seen a harder worker than him. He used to wake me up at bloody 6:30 in the morning and kick me out of bed to go and do the ponies, so it's always been, we've always been going from the start. And, I'm not great at holidays. I don't go skiing. I don't go on the beach. It's even the fact I'm here with 2 horses now and there's 20 back in Eschweiler and 3 down in Wellington, your mind is always going as to how they are and how they're keeping. So, but it's just me. I can't stop. You have to be doing something. I'm sure if I got, I have to be doing something and always looking for the next horse and trying to figure this horse out. Or, the worst thing is we've got lights in the indoor, so we can be there all night and all morning. First thing in the morning, there all night. But yeah, and okay, on the flip side of it now, I must say my patience is a lot better than it used to be. I used to be very impatient, wanted everything to happen now, but I've a lot of good Helena quotes actually. She always says to me, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, So, and ultimately, if you're good, if you're a good person and you're a good worker, all them things, and you keep doing the right things, it'll happen. There's always another horse around the corner or another class or whatever.
We missed one of the most important questions. We haven't talked about you, really about your personality, and you said that you're more patient now than you used to be. Can you tell us who you are in terms of qualities, in terms of personality, in terms of ambitions?
I don't know about the other ambitions I can talk about. The other ones I wouldn't be wouldn't be great at talking about. But listen, I'm very ambitious. Even when I got Quirex, 2 shows and straight to the Super Grand Prix, I'm very much a grab a bull by the horns type of person, you know what I mean? I don't, if I always, roll up my sleeves and get stuck in, As I said, I was quite impatient as a younger rider, and used to be wanted it all to happen now. But that is an awful lot better, young horses teach you. That's the one thing with horses, they teach you every day. So I've had B Skyhawk, I've had him 5.5 years now. So but it only feels like we've done 6 shows together, if that makes sense. But I'd say I'm very driven, maybe a bit stubborn, maybe.
We can say. You mentioned your father and Shane Breen as horsemen. What's a horseman to you?
Yeah, a horseman to me, it's a very good question, because it's a very broad term that gets thrown around quite a lot, but what is a horseman is someone who does right by the horse, someone who can get the best out of a horse, and get into the horse's head, you know, and figure them out.
The last part of this interview is more technical, so Michael, here are a few questions. Do you have tips or a method to walk a course, maybe like Peter Fredrickson or other one?
No, I must say I'm the complete opposite to Peter.
Okay.
Half the time I don't even walk the course half the time until it's about 140 or that. But what tips have I got? Yeah, to be honest, no, I'm very laid back with course walks. Yeah.
What's your favorite gymnastic exercise at home to train horses, to jump horses?
I suppose one thing I use a lot is landing poles to keep the horses straight. You know, I think so important to have them, you know, pushing from the same hind leg and to have them really, you know, true and correct and straight. That's so I would put a pole either side of the landing. Yeah, that would be. Yeah, I used to do a lot of those bounces and things like that, but not as much as I used to anymore, to be honest. But yeah, the straightness I'm, you know, very, very tough on.
What is the first thing you observe when you are trying a horse that you want to buy for the higher sport?
I think nowadays, you know, if you're buying a horse for the higher sport, you know, you've probably done it or it looks, you know. So yeah, the obvious things of whatever, jumping ability and all that are there, but big thing now for me is conformation of the horse. You know, it's so hard. The sport is very, very demanding now and tough. So, you know, the conformation of the horse is crucial for you know, a sustained career. You often see stories of, you know, this horse and, you know, did it for a while, but to build a career, you know, with a horse is you know, you need time with them and you need to, you know, have them at that sport for a long time, you know. So, you know, you look at like horses like, you know, King Edward now, for example. He's such a little rubber ball, you know, and because even his style of jumping is hard. The fact that he can, you know, continue as long as he has is incredible. And so I would say, you know, yeah, conformation for me.
What are the most important things that you try to get or feel when you flat ride a horse?
Yeah, they're all different. Every horse is different. Ultimately, though, you're looking for the same thing, that they're off your leg and that they're soft and they're warm, you know, warmed up correctly. And, you know, if you have a relaxed horse with a soft back and responsive aids, then that's 80% of it, you know. That's the most of it.
It's enough to jump.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, but yeah, you know, the biggest thing I suppose is that they're relaxed and taking off your leg.
But still, you said earlier that Hank Nuren told you about shoulder in.
Yeah.
So it's still useful at some point?
Yeah, no, listen, my dressage now is I would say, yeah, I'm not Ankie van Grunsen or that, but I would say now my flat work is a hell of a lot better. It's so important, you know, all that lateral work and things like that is also comes back to the soundness of the horse, you know, when they're, you know, soft and through, and, you know, the more rideable they are, you know, obviously the easier it is when you get in the ring. So, you know, it is very, very important.
Do you have a piece of advice that you can share for the young riders that are trying to get the same career as yours, or that are trying to reach the highest level of sports?
Yeah, I'd say one thing I see a lot now, slipping is you know, there's a lot of very early success now, right? So like, you know, a lot of younger riders can get access to bigger shows, but not to, and I'm saying this from experience because sometimes I think I did, but not to skip the learning part, you know. In every other industry, you have to go to university, you have to go to school, then university, and, you know, you've got to do your time. So to get into one of the best yards that you can, you know, like for me, you look at Jos Lansing or Ludger Beerbohm, they're churning out riders and riders and riders. You know, to get into somewhere like that, if you know, not to be worried about, you know, money or trying to do this or want to ride this class or that. If you can give 3-4 years learning off one of them guys, it's going to stand to you for the next 30-40 years. So that would be, yeah, one thing I would say is to, you know, don't skip the learning.
What's your next challenge, Michael?
The Yeah, keep putting together. I've got some very, very good young horses, 8, 9, 10-year-olds. So I want to, ultimately this year I'm going to do globals, and I'd like to ride a few cups and do all that again. But I would be working back from Aachen 2026, the World Games. That would be the next one. And then I've got two very good, now 9-year-olds, a very good 8-year-old that will be looking back from Los Angeles in 4 years.
All eyes on you.
Well,
Thank you.
We'll give it a go anyway.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks a million.